Herzig. I'd like to ask you the question, what was the most important document that you uncovered when you were searching the archives in Washington that led to the redress?
Oh dear. What was the most important document, I think, that might have led to redress, that I might have
That
seen?
you found.
That I found? Oh dear. Hard to give a 1, 2, 3, 4 answer. But the one that most people have picked up on is a report that was issued by General DeWitt, who was the commander of this Western Defense Command at the time, who was responsible for taking care of the assembly centers that we were all put into first. His report, I had seen some correspondence in the archives that showed he had written this report. Actually, his name was on it, but I know that it was written by his Assistant Chief of Staff, Colonel Carl Bendetson, because General DeWitt didn't have enough brains to write such a book. And Colonel Bendetson was a lawyer, very shrewd, clever, very smart man. But I know that he's the one who wrote it, because he took credit for it in a personal letter that I received from a friend. Personal letter written by Colonel Bendetson saying, yes, he had written the report. Of course, he won't take credit for it. He's not supposed to take credit for it. At any rate, the series of correspondence that I saw said that the War Department in Washington, D.C. was very angry about the report because it was a very self-serving, I'm quoting what the War Department said, self-serving document that was very racist in nature. And the government didn't want such a report under the imprantor, the logo of the War Department, that it would put out such a terrible report. So the War Department was reassured by General DeWitt's office that don't worry, we only printed 10 copies of this, and we'll make necessary changes. And I remember seeing all the changes that were suggested. I don't remember all 55 of them, but I do remember there were 55 changes requested to make it more palatable to not only our countrymen, but to all the international governments that's going to read this report, justifying what happened to us. So General DeWitt said, don't worry, only 10 copies were made. We'll recall all 10 copies, and we'll make the adjustment. We'll alter the report the way you want it. Well, this series of correspondence showed that they were able to locate the copies, all except for one copy. And there was an affidavit written by a warrant officer saying that I have witnessed the destruction of this original report by burning. They destroyed it by burning, except for the one copy they couldn't find. It happened that since I knew about the requests for changes to be made, and I saw this particular copy sitting on an archivist's desk one day, and I was flipping through it. I said, oh, you have this DeWitt's report? Yeah. Well, I looked through it, and it was not the same one. And I saw in the margins written notes, alter this sentence. This is not true. This is not War Department policy. This is your policy. Change this, change that. Wow, I said, this is the 10th copy that they couldn't find. And I told the archivist, I said, you know what you got here? He said, no. I told him the story. He said, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I should know these things. I said, you can't be embarrassed. You got millions of papers you've been looking at over the last 25, 30 years. You can't be expected to know the source and the reason for this, that, and the other. So, well, he felt relieved that I wasn't going to make a big deal of it. But it turned out that that was the basis for proving in the Coram Nobis case, for example, which I turned over to the Coram Nobis lawyers, Korematsu, Hirobayashi, and Yasui. it turned out to be the basis for vacating the 1944, 43, and 44 convictions of Hirobayashi, Korematsu, and Yasui, because the Korenovus lawyers, brilliant bunch of young Sansei lawyers, were able to prove through the things that were found in the original report of DeWitt that the report was altered and original report was destroyed. And when the government tried to defend the War Department in 1944 in Korematsu especially, that they had not called attention to the fact that there are certain things in the report, DeWitt's report, that were not true. They did not call attention to the Supreme Court judges that the report was not true. And the Korenovus lawyers did a tremendous job of dissecting this, and it's the basis on which they really won, not overturning, but vacating the 1944 wartime convictions of the Nisei guys who had challenged the legality and constitutionality of the incarceration and the exclusion of Japanese Americans. I would say that that was one of the more important documents that I found. There was one other short document that memo that I found, has to do with the Japanese American Peruvians, Japanese Peruvians. And this was a memo by a State Department official warning another office that let's not put into writing the fact that we, the United States government, was responsible for initiating and implementing the program to abduct, kidnap the Japanese Peruvians and the Latin, Central, and South American Peruvians to bring them to the United States for internment so they could be used as hostage reserve, so that they could be used to exchange for American prisoners held by Japan. Now, just to see that piece of paper saying, I advise you not to put it in writing, that we were responsible. That blew my mind. You know, I thought, boy, this is a little dynamite. And I think the Japanese Peruvians who are now asking for Congress to study the question about why they were kidnapped and brought up here, and there's a lawsuit in the courts asking for compensation for their particular bad treatment by the United States. I think that this particular document is one of the key documents that I think they're going to use, and I hope they'll use it. But it was really a mind-blowing thing to find not just that DeWitt report, original report, but also this one little paper. There were lots of other very important papers, I think, but those are stick up in my mind as some of the key ones. There's some other very interesting ones. One day I want to just sit and talk about the documents. That would be fun for people to find out. This is the kind of thing that I really enjoyed finding in the archives, because it put them right in front as responsible on a really racial basis for a lot of the things that happened to us.